Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It's another epi of Unlocked. My name is Eric Flyen, on solo on today's epi as we begin our deep dive full preview into First Stand 2026, the second ever installment of the Winter International event in this newly revamped three-split format that we're seeing internationally, and we obviously had the LPL finals over the weekend, so finalized number one that JDG will be going, and BLG, yeah, I'm going to say convincingly handling that series. Makes you feel a little bit better about them heading into this international event. We'll see where that slots in JDG. And then, of course, post America's Cup, even though neither of the CBLOL or LCS representatives were obviously taking place in that event, if you watched any of it, somehow you're left feeling a lot worse about Lion and maybe a lot better about Loud, even though a lot of people weren't expecting Loud to actually be the CBLOL representative after Furia went undefeated against the LCS. We're left going, well, did Lion have a level up, or did Cloud9 have a collapse and continue to collapse in the America's Cup? So it definitely changes our viewpoint. But today we're doing player rankings for the 8 squads that will be representing at First Stand again in Brazil, where you'll have that home court advantage for the boys from Loud. And we're going to start on that top side of the map. And get ready if you heard this one before, but prepare yourselves for a whole lot of Gen G hanging out at the tippity top of this list. And I mean, Keen, no question, going to be the top laner coming in here. Bin behind him. It does feel a little bit like we're somewhat removed from the drama of him, walking away from the team, packing his bags, all that kind of yada yada hogwash, if you will, at the start of the season. But Keen, obviously, really the main threat for him is who's the better Aurora on his squad, and some other champions when you're talking about what Chovy can do on the pick. And of course, he got his first ever Penta on it. But even with Bin kind of looking better over the last month or so, especially in the playoffs for BLG, it feels like Keen is still hands down, no question, no contest, the best top laner heading into this event. And as you trickle down from him, Bin, we of course alluded to Xiaozhu and Clear, both two guys making their international debuts. And I think Xiaozhu has the ceiling seems a little bit higher for him. Clear has been around a little bit longer, even though we haven't seen him at these bigger international events. I'm excited to see Xiaozhu make his international debut against these big boys in a guy like Keen. Clear, obviously, he's been going head-to-head against Bin for the entirety of the LPL split. But I'm excited for these younger, less proven guys to make their debut. And honestly, I think you could... We're being generous with, the LCK side of things. I think really Broken Blade actually fairly in that 4 spot in between Xiaozhu and Clear, based on, we've had some spicy picks out of him with the Yasuo coming through, and we saw a full level up from, not just G2 across the board, but Broken Blade specifically in the playoff run where, G2 had their major level up. And sometimes we're talking about Broken Blade as the liability on the LEC squad, and sometimes he's the standout. We've seen that kind of flip-flop between various MSIs and world championships that he has attended with G2. But for now, heading into this event, we're feeling very good about him. And then below that, I know Dokla at 8 seems harsh, but truthfully, Pun and Gino are kind of standout performers on their respective squads. Gino's had some highlight reel plays, and Pun had a set pick in one of the grand final matches for Team Secret Wales in the LCP. So really, the preface and preamble for this entire event is even the guy at 8, even more so than in years past, it really feels like the LCP, now the leveled up CBLOL after what we got in the America's Cup, there's no gimme. There's no walkover squad at this event, and there's really no walkover or underwhelming players. So I know it seems disrespectful to have Dokla there after he's had, a solid playoff run for Lion with some of these crazy 80 carry picks, and then followed it up with a great series against Cloud9. But it's a comparable bottom 3. I think they're at equal levels. And yes, maybe we're peeling a layer back for Lion Gaming again, based on how America's Cup went. But that does not affect what we have in those jungle rankings, as yes, again, it's Gen G, it's Canyon, easy, locking in that number 1 spot. And when we do, the full preview predictions for this event, you can talk about taking Gen G or any one of the other 7 teams. I think most people would side with Gen G over any of the other 7 squads. But respect to Inspired, granted, for the major level up that he had in playoffs, and of course the impact that he has on this squad. I had by the way, 8 KDA across 22 games in that first split of the lock-in tournament over in the LCS. And I know it was a slow start for Lion, but we've kind of beat this to death now, talking about the scrims that they didn't get until very late in the offseason, blah, blah, blah. But Inspired was incredibly consistent throughout, and he's doing it, some of the main criticism, aside from, harsh attitudes and team communication. He's an AFK farming jungler. This is, again, in the past we've talked about this, but that playstyle doesn't really apply anymore. He's not even near the top when it comes to gold percentage in terms of junglers, and we've seen him be incredibly active in getting his laners ahead, and we've seen him emphasize different lanes throughout different series this year for Lion. We saw Dokla on the Varus and the Vayne games where he got lots of jungle attention. We've seen him pivot down bot lane to get Berserker and Isles rolling, and finally got this huge level up from Saint at playoffs. So you can talk about throwing some mid lane love as well. But even him right there, look at the Western representation when you're talking about junglers, because yes, Skewmond was pretty much consensus the best jungler, definitely through playoffs in the LEC, but you could have even made that argument throughout the regular season of LEC versus. So 2 Western players in that 2-3 spot when you're talking about junglers, and I think absolutely 100% deservedly so to talk about them both there. And that's mainly or partially a combo of, yes, those 2 have been fantastic, and yes, Jun and Junjia over in the LPL are a little bit suspect at times. It's a sine wave. It's very wavy in terms of that performance, and you can slap Raptor in there as well. Usually, we have, of all roles in the LPL and LCK, at least 2 to 3 consistent. You're throwing Owner in or somebody on like Kanavi or Peanut, and in the jungle spot, you're very confident. It's not so much the case, again, after Canyon. That's why you have these Western guys. It's a combo of respecting what they've been doing and understanding that the consistency is not quite there out of the LPL and LCK guys. And again, even his toe and Young Jay's another Korean jungler that, again, a classic middle to bottom tier LCK player who then goes over to a lesser region. Yes, we're including anyone that's not the LCK or the LPL, a lesser region by comparison, but has a standout performance and wins the entire split. But honestly, probably in terms of international event that has, more than 6 teams being represented, maybe, possibly, definitely the weakest jungle pool that's probably been sent. And yes, that is a case in point. And an opportunity for both Inspired and Skewmon to really, have their impact and showcase why they are regarded as premier in that position within their respective regions. So I'm excited to see, number one, what the meta showcase can be. There's so many crazy jungle carries, even outside of the Ambesses of the Aatroxes being swapped. We've seen Kha'Zix become more and more, or less and less, a pocket pick, and more as soon as you get to game 3 or 4 of these best of 5s. And by the way, best of 5s whole way through for this best of 5s and Fearless, of course, for this whole first stand event. So yes, you better believe that we're going to be getting towards that bottom area of champion pool for junglers. So there's going to be a lot of those carries, and we're going to be seeing Kha'Zix a whole lot throughout this event, and other guys who can take over. So excited to see both Skewmon and Inspired prove themselves on that big international stage. Then we roll on to the mid lane, which to me is always the most fun role to go through when we get to these international events, and that's because it's usually incredibly stacked. And I think this year's no different. There's obviously some very familiar faces. How often are we talking about Caps, Knight, and Chovy at international events? And it's almost all of the time. And this year we get to throw in a little bit of Hong Q angle, which, by the way, all this guy has ever done in his incredibly short career is qualify for international events and not even be a dark horse, but show up and perform. And because of that, we're slotting him in that 3 spot ahead of somebody like Caps, who actually fully found his form in playoffs and kind of carried G2, especially in that game 5 against Carmine Corp, all those crazy Anivia outplays that he had head-to-head against Yahoo and just against KC in general. So this is Caps coming in fine form to this event, but you've got to acknowledge what Hong Q did towards the end of the split. And yes, a lot of that is paired with the synergy that he has with his buddy Junjia, but Hong Q, he's not even 19 years old, guys. And like the development, the trajectory has been absolutely insane. He was getting solo kills on Knight. No way you're going to put him ahead of Knight based on the body of work here in Split 1, but at least has been the main rival and the clear second best mid laner in the LPL behind Knight, which is why 2-3 is where they're hanging out. And I think Knight hit the season kind of guns blazing in those mid lane matchups and teetered off a little bit, but again, the standard and expectations that we have for a player of the caliber of Knight is a lot higher than your average Joe Schmo in the LPL or any other region. So we hold him to a higher standard, and we hold Chovy to even a higher standard than Knight. But this is domestic Chovy that we got so far, and this is non-Worlds Chovy, which, let's face it, over the last couple of years, if you remove the World Championship tournaments, which I understand is a big if and a big contention in terms of Chovy's career, but this dude's been the best, not just mid laner, best player on the planet for like 90% of the last several years, and hands down, no question, the number 1 mid laner coming into this event, and will be, if you were to ask all these other mid laners who are you most excited to match up against, I near but guarantee you most of them will be picking Chovy in that. And that's even, guys who have gone head to head with him a lot of different times. And if you're just looking at purely, Korean players, by the way, that are on this board, let's dive back in here. Okay, Chovy, Korean. Hong Q, not Korean. Knight, not Korean, which is actually, okay, surprising. Vikla, and then, of course, Envy. So, you know what? Envy and Saint, it's actually better than you would maybe expect. I would expect at least, 5 out of 8 of these guys to be Korean. So that's growth there. But how about the resurgence out of Vikla, getting solo kills on both Faker and Chovy in this somewhat miracle run of a playoff push that BNK had, and somebody like Saint. Almost all these guys have had serious level ups in these playoffs. So Saint, even though he's at 7, you're saying this guy just leveled up. How are you praising him? Well, Dyer is another young guy under the age of 2019 who picked up so many player of the games for Team Secret Wales and was kind of their most important player en route to capturing that LCP title. So he is absolutely one of the guys under the radar to watch at this entire event. But everybody is just playing for second behind Chovy at this event in terms of mid lane matchups. Down we go to El Batleno, which right after mid lane, we're obsessed with carries. We're obsessed with guys doing damage, and that's been a tale as old as time in League of Legends and just gaming in general. So AD carry, the one right after mid lane I'm most excited about. And for this tournament specifically, I might be even more excited about the bot lane matchup, and that's because we're kind of getting a merging of past era and new gen AD carries to talk about. And of course, Ruler and Diablo are the main 2 examples of that, even though Gen G absolutely handled Diablo in both of their playoff series, really. Still, you've seen the signs of this, again, 18-year-old absolute star to be, or already star in the LCK. And I think, maybe you could argue Gala over him based on how playoffs ended up going, but Gala also had, was, despite kind of being better head-to-head, getting the bot lane matchup edge in a lot of the head-to-heads between them and BLG, and that's why he's ahead of Viper on this list. But he still had some suspect moments, getting baited by On and dying in kind of a key fight in the finals. The highs that we've seen out of Diablo are still more than enough reason to put him ahead of Gala. So it's the 2 LCK 80 carries followed by the 2 LPL 80 carries. And usually a list like this, you'd have Viper right near the tippity top. It's honestly unbelievable that BLG come away with the LPL title with us kind of sitting watching Viper going, is that the same dude from Hanwha Life? We still have not really seen Viper have near the impact that he had, obviously back on EDG in his first stint with the LPL, where he was picking up MVPs and World Championships, and then even what he did on Hanwha Life when it wasn't even the stacked Hanwha Life. This is not the Viper of old, and maybe it comes out here at first stand, but so far still not firing at that level, and yeah, BLG still won the split. So maybe you're feeling even better about BLG with Viper not reaching those levels. Then we get to some of the Western guys. Hans Sama, the highest ranking in the 5 zone, but do not sleep on really, again, any of these other 4. Obviously, Bull is another LCK product that had some standout moments. If you recall, he was getting subbed in on, was it then the DN Freaks? I can't remember if it was the Freaks or Supers. Probably the Freaks, but don't sleep on him. And Eddie, right there beside Dyer, the guy we were just hyping on Team Secret Whales, but Eddie is similar to Doggo in the fact that this guy only knows how to go forward. He was picking up quadra kills, pentakills multiple times throughout the split, and similar to Viper, Berserker is a guy who's slowly starting to ramp up in that 80 carry spot. Much like the rest of Lion Gaming, you know, how about 2 guys, by the way, on DN Freaks at some point when you're talking about Berserker and Bull, but Berserker has looked much better, leaps and bounds better than he was during that stint in the LCK. We're, like Viper, still waiting to see that Berserker MVP level of old. Maybe some stiffer competition in that bot lane matchup is exactly what he and Lion Gaming will need, but I worry a bit when you pair him with Isles against some of these 2v2s, but we'll see. And then, again, Hans Sama alluded to in that 5 spot ahead of everybody. Hans Sama, I think, you know, Caps and Broken Blade took a lot of the headlines, and even Skewan. There were a lot of guys to highlight on G2. But Hans Sama is slowly becoming an underrated 80 carry, which sounds insane for a guy who had so much hype early on in his career and now has been on G2 for, like 4+ years, but had some, the Kai'Sa game obviously was fantastic in playoffs, but has been incredibly consistent and reliable when it comes to late game team fighting, being aggressive when he needs to. He's not, you know, in the Jackie Love tier of crazy aggressiveness, and that's fine. Most Western players aren't, but when you need him to pop off in a fight, if he's fed, if he's the guy who's been funneled to gold, he is one of the most reliable carries, not just 80 carries, but late game carries in Europe, and I'm excited to see him match up, get another international opportunity alongside his buddy Labrov in that bot lane, who, believe it or not, both sitting in that 5 spot in terms of their respective rankings. And outside of that, yes, you best believe it, Gen G, the clean sweep, all 5 positions, number 1. And truthfully, even if, let's say, T1 and Kyria were attending this event, I'd still be putting Duro number 1, because this guy has been an absolute menace. And it's kind of hilarious to look back now on his, as he goes into his 2nd year with Gen G. But you remember last year, before first stand, we were sitting there going, this guy's a liability. Why is he on this star-studded Gen G squad? He's going to be a weak point. And flash forward, I mean, even just a couple months after that, but now a year after, best Nautilus buffering on the planet by far. We've seen him do it against every champion imaginable. Didn't even know it was possible on a lot of them. And the synergy with him and Ruler now is top tier. His synergy with the rest of the squad, top tier. So just absolutely excited to see Duro matching up at yet another international event, getting more experience under his belt. Behind him is another dude making his INTL debut, and that is Vampire on JDG, one of the most hyped up young supports in the LPL, going on, I feel like almost at least 2 years now, but finally has a platform to showcase his talents with JDG and alongside a dude like Gala. So I'm very excited to more people being welcomed to the talent prodigy that is Vampire. And yes, we have him ahead of somebody like on this list who, I'm not going to say has been more consistent than his bot lane buddy Viper, because On still likes to go on warding expeditions, get caught out, die for no reason, but also, again, baits Gala in a marquee finals match on the Nico. He still has these insane engages where you can meme with the on-off switch, but he still has had more on switches than off this first split for BLG, and nobody has better synergy with their AD carry right now than Kellen and Diablo. So absolutely Kellen, a guy that I think Diablo gets more of the credit, which is always how these AD carry support duos work out. AD carry gets all the credit, support does all the work, but we will not be sleeping on him. And don't even sleep on any of these other guys. I know Isles had a great level up, had some great Poppy performances, especially in those finals against Cloud9. But it's just one more time where I'm going to say somebody has to go down to 7 or 8. You know, Redbird, I think, was kind of the easy 8 on this one. No offense to him more than anybody else on that Loud roster. But, you know, Isles buy in that 6th spot for Team Secret Whales, and even LeBron at 5, you know. All those guys have had fantastic splits, and it feels harsh even putting them this low, but that is just, these are elite squads within their region that are being represented. It is the best of the best, so somebody has to be dropped down, and still feeling pretty good about all of them. I know we're harping on Lion, even though they had nothing to do with America's Cup, but I'll be honest, it did take them a peg back seeing what Cloud9 were putting up, going like completely winless against Furia. You're kind of going, is this just a full Cloud9 collapse? Were they actually at a higher level in the LCS? We were feeling good about having maybe 3, dare I say 4 good teams in the LCS, and that completely crumbled, done and dusted after this America's Cup. So I think, you know, we'll do a deeper dive on the actual preview, team rankings, and, you know, how we think things are going to be playing out, as there's, again, 2 groups in this first stand matchup to get to. But G2 definitely feeling like the stronger Western squad, and I think even before the America's Cup, people would be saying that. But Mark and I will be back to do the full breakdown, full preview of this entire event. But you know, even in a tiny venue, it's going to be hype with that Brazilian crowd and a Brazilian squad representing. But that is it today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you to all you stunners for hanging out and supporting as always. You know, we'll catch you on that flippity flip.